What we see going on in our United States Capitol today really makes clear the fact that as society continues to move forward, it's readily apparent that hashtag MeToo can happen to you too. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to all of our loyal subscribers in the tribe. You truly are our community, and we could not do this without you. If this is your first time watching, please feel free to watch all the way to the end. Leave us a like if you like the content, or give us a comment and tell us what you think in general, whether that be agreement or disagreement. We always say on this channel, the only way we're going to make free thought great again is by being willing to have the conversation. Now, as you heard in the intro, we're talking about the MeToo movement and how it really does relate to the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation proceedings currently going on at the time of this recording. The first thing we want to make sure that we drive home is the fact that MeToo was a movement that began in October of 2017, specifically to call out and eradicate ne'er-do-wells from our society who had enjoyed relative anonymity in the past, and give women who really have had terrible things happen to them a chance to really voice what their struggles have been and shine a light on the ugliness that we can sometimes turn a blind eye to just for lack of apparent knowledge. Now, what we don't appreciate, though, is when we see things that seem to be tinged by political motivations. And for more on that, I'm going to turn this over to Eddie now.
Well, yeah, and like you said, it's always important to couch it from a place of situations arising from the MeToo movement being brought from a good place, a wholesome place. But the timing of certain allegations, specifically with regard to Brett Kavanaugh, we've all seen the saga play out over the past fortnight or so. It's what is the possible phenomenon of the pendulum swinging a little bit too far in the wrong direction with regard to the climate that MeToo has created. It's one thing to create an environment where women and men, by the way, are comfortable coming forward and expressing their experiences and having a safe environment in which to confront and see their accusers be brought to justice. At the same time, when we see allegations like the one that Dr. Blasey Ford brought against Judge Kavanaugh, it really calls into question the validity and the motivations of those doing the accusing. In this case, we're talking about decades-old allegations, and that in and of itself is not necessarily a reason to cast doubt. But the problem is the lack of substance. That as of the time of this recording, there's been no corroborative evidence brought forward. It's almost been a deliberate he said, she said setup that the Democrats, who had this information months ago, by the way, decided to sit on and then release at a politically opportune moment. We have a problem with that here at the Wright Brothers, and anyone who is really invested in the spirit of the Me Too movement should also have a problem with it, because this is the type of information that you go to the authorities with as soon as possible. Right. Do not wait for a politically expedient time, or do not wait for proper hands to be greased even for the opportunity to come forward. No, it's something that needs to be actionable. And if by some unforeseen circumstance it was proven true in this instance with Judge Kavanaugh, anyone would want him gone. We do not condone that sort of behavior, and no one with a conscience would. But it's not fair to put the American public in a position to where they have to choose between a he said, she said, when it's obviously a political gambit that's being played. And if it's something that actually happened, the best case scenario is that for Dr. Ford is that she's being used as a pawn by the Democratic National Committee, and that's not fair to her. That's not fair to Judge Kavanaugh. That's not fair to anybody watching these proceedings. And the worst case scenario, obviously, is that this was a completely fabricated story, and that does no one any good, and it further undermines the entire judicial process and the process of nominating our Supreme Court judges, which frankly at this point has turned into a bit of a circus. And Damani, I know we are going to get into more hearkening even back to the Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas hearings, but what's your take on the environment that has been created and how you see people taking advantage of it right now? Right.
So what I really find to be hard to believe is, and what calls into question the overall verisimilitude of Ford's allegations, which are now almost 4 decades old, is the fact that there was not a immediate call to release this information when Dianne Feinstein first received it several weeks ago. And it was only released at a point in time when it was deemed to be politically beneficial to the left. And that completely goes at cross purposes with what Me Too was meant to do. As we said in the beginning, it was meant to help expose people who really have committed these heinous atrocities. And time will tell if these allegations are true or not. Obviously, based on the lack of evidence and corroborating evidence that we have, we call into question whether these events ever actually transpired. But as we said before, time will tell. But this has the insidious precedent of calling anyone into question, regardless of the time and period that's elapsed, if they stand to be in a position to be hurt from it. And that honestly is an insidious precedent that is set, because when you think about it, think about where you could be 30 years from now and someone fabricates possibly allegations against you. What we're seeing also with this is a lack of due process. And we're seeing that the American people have become the judge, jury, and executioner without having given the person the right of due process, knowing what really happened, hearing what really happened before jumping to conclusions. We see this happen all the time, and it's unfair, and it establishes that precedent for you being guilty until proven innocent. And that is completely antithetical to what our judicial process should be. Now, what's interesting to note is that back actually 27 days before I was born, on October 11th, 1991, Clarence Thomas was defending himself against similar allegations from Anita Hill. We want to play this clip for you now just to give you some context on what we're talking about, and then we'll jump back in and give you our take on that.
This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. It is a high-tech lynching, and it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, you will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
So what you see in the clip that just played before is that Clarence Thomas felt the need to defend himself, and the words that he used were representative of someone who was completely nonplussed at what had been foisted upon him, basically, by the Anita Hill. And the verbiage he chose was so poignant in that it was a high-tech lynching, basically. And when you draw parallels between what happened to Clarence Thomas, who is still on the Supreme Court to this day, and then you juxtapose those against what's happening to Judge Brett Kavanaugh right now, what you notice is that basically Clarence Thomas was obviously vindicated. But what we see is that Judge Kavanaugh now is literally being strung up on the tree of the American people's court of public opinion without being afforded the right to due process. And I have a huge problem with that. And Eddie, I'm sure you do as well. Give me your take on that.
Well, yeah, and this whole situation, it hits home to me. As many of you know, I'm the father of a young son right now, my first and only child, and I'm extremely proud of him and excited and enjoying seeing life through his eyes for the first time. But what really gives me pause was when situations like this arise, is trying to envision the type of environment that he's growing up in. And now, look, I realize that this is not a judicial process at this point, as no official criminal charges have been filed. But the same principle needs to apply both in and out of the courtroom as American citizens, which is the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And so what I see is, in the case of Judge Kavanaugh, here's a man who's admitted to, kind of being a goody two-shoes, mostly buttoned-down guy growing up. Was a virgin all the way up past entering his college years, which is extremely rare, or increasingly rare, among young people. Very few will confess to that, and even fewer can actually provide any sort of corroborative evidence of that. But that part aside, I think about how I raise my son, and assuming that I'm blessed to do a good enough job to where he heeds the wise counsel of his mother and I, and we're able to set his feet on the right path, and he's able to get himself in a position to achieve something through hard work. Is that all at risk of being thrown away because of a spurious allegation made against him by someone with a motive. And while there is something to be said for not putting yourself in compromising situations, and people like Vice President Pence come to mind here, who are very careful about that sort of thing and not being thrust into those types of situations. At the same time, people are going to live their lives, and if you are living your life in the fear that someone who may be ideologically opposed to you will use a situation or even embellish upon a situation to make you seem like something that you're not, that is something that I take extremely seriously, and that's conversations that my son and I are going to have as he grows up, just to try to avoid these types of situations that you can put yourself to be above reproach in any specific regard. But that aside, that shouldn't be a conversation that we should be having. We shouldn't have males that are afraid to live their lives and be males around females. And by being males, I mean be gentlemen, be chivalrous. Right. We shouldn't have females who are afraid to come forward if something truly untoward has occurred. And that means be ladylike, but that doesn't necessarily mean be chaste. If we can't be human beings who God made us to be around each other, we've created a entire environment of mistrust, and you can't. A healthy society simply cannot function under such auspices. So, Damani, I'll let you take us home, but just for me, this is something that I've thought a lot about, and it hits me extremely personally, and I think it's something that we should all, whether we're parents or not, consider going forward.
No, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And basically, all I really have to say from this point is that the apologue of The Boy Who Cried Wolf has never been more appropriate when you draw parallels, in that basically what's going on is, if these allegations are found to be untrue, and we've had to go through all of this basically for nothing, for fabrication, what that has done is that's detracted from what the MeToo movement was intended to do, which is to excoriate the right people who have done these terrible things and bring them to justice. And basically, this just opens up Pandora's box for future generations of males who may be forced to live in fear that possibly one day, when they are to possibly reach the doorstep of their dream job, and then they might possibly have to worry about who's going to come forward and falsely accuse me of something just in the name of political expediency, if they do believe differently than I do. So we appreciate y'all taking this time. We try to keep these videos as brief as we can. Also, don't forget to check out our Facebook page, the Wright Brothers IPID, where you can participate in polls, get behind the scenes content, and really hear from us, deliver the news in real time, and give our perspective on it. It's important for us to remain politically active. We know the midterms are right around the corner. Do us a favor, let us know what you think in the comment section below. What do you think about all this? Do you think that these allegations can be verified, or do you think that it's just another way that the left is trying to slight President Trump's latest SCOTUS pick? So please give us your thoughts down below. We appreciate your time. We couldn't do this without all of y'all. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. And without further ado, thanks and gig 'em.
Thanks and gig 'em.
The first revolution is when you change your mind about how you look at things and see that there might be another way to look at it that you have not been shown. The revolution will not be televised, and be no rerun, brothers and sisters. The revolution will be live.